No, go away. This isn't that kind of channel. Welcome to Forgotten GBA. My goal is to dive into the GBA's expansive library and shine a light on some of the more overlooked games on the handheld. With that said, let's take a look at our first game. Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand. Boktai is an action RPG released by Konami on September 16, 2003. It was directed by Akuya Nakamura, produced by Hideo Kojima, with music composed by Kazuki Muraoka, Masashi Watanabe, Norihiko Hibino, and Shuichi Kobori. As soon as you pick up this game, you'll quickly realize it's not your average Game Boy Advance game. Boktai actually has a solar sensor built into the bottom of the cartridge. This makes it just a little bit taller than your normal Game Boy Advance games. It was one of the first Game Boy Advance games with an additional piece of hardware added to the board to impact the player in real time. The Game Boy Color had 23 carts to come out with a rumble feature, and this is just a natural evolution of that. The solar sensor plays a large part in the story of Boktai, so let's look at that next.
In a place not too far from here and now, the end of the world approaches. The undead appear, breaking the natural cycle of life and death. The evolution of species ceases, and one by one, they become extinct.
The main character is Django, a young vampire hunter who is the sole heir to the gun Del Sol. He uses this gun to purify various immortals and undead on his way to avenge his father Ringo, who died at the hands of the Count of Ground-Soaking Blood. It sounds a bit much for a Game Boy game, but alright. The Count attacked the city of San Miguel at the request of the Queen of Darkness, Hell, with one L. Their goal is to capture the moon beauty, Mani, to use as a sacrifice. The game starts off in San Miguel, the city of the sun. Django has nothing but the gun Del Sol, his father's red scarf, and his father's old partner Otenko, a cute little sunflower guy. Otenko has informed Django that he must make his way to Istrakhan, the city of death, to prevent the end of the world. On your way, you'll run into various enemies, including ghouls, zombies, mummies, kraken, golems, cockatrices, and even mimics that take the form of swords, axes, armor, and the traditional chests. The bosses of this world are referred to as immortals. When you defeat each boss, you'll then have to drag their coffin back through the dungeon to a machine called the Pile Driver to purify them. A recurring enemy you'll see is Sabata, who looks eerily similar to Django. He mocks you as you progress through the game, leading up until the very end when you finally get to face off. Let's jump into the gameplay of Boktai. While this is an action RPG, there's a large emphasis on stealth. Similar to the Metal Gear games, you can flatten yourself onto walls, shimmy by enemies, and create distractions by knocking. The gun Del Sol is your main weapon. It has 4 different attachments that change how it functions. You have the lens, which changes the type of solar energy you can shoot, the frame, which changes your beam pattern, the battery, which increases the amount of solar energy you can store, and the grenade, which gives you access to explosives that can damage enemies, light up rooms, and reveal hidden items. This is where the main use of the solar sensor comes in. You can use the sun to charge your solar gun. When you run out of charge, you'll be unable to shoot the gun Del Sol to purify enemies until you can find a way to recharge it. You can charge a gun in sunspots and dungeons, outside, with the solar station, and with solar nuts. The solar sensor is also used to solve puzzles and change where you warp to. I have to admit, this is a really cool touch. While you can warp through dungeons you've beat no matter the weather outside, if you want to make large warps across the map, you'll need to increase or decrease the amount of sunlight that's hitting the sensor to warp to your desired location. If you choose to forego the stealth aspect of the game, you can shoot enemies in the back to stun them, or the front if you don't mind being spotted. The controls are tight and responsive, and if I ever was spotted by an enemy, it always felt like it was my fault and not the game's. Combat is fun, and messing around with the different frames and lenses kept the game interesting. Outside of combat and stealth, there are various puzzles you'll have to solve throughout your journey. The puzzles include pushing blocks of wood or ice to create paths, bouncing light off of mirrors, revealing platforms with different levels of sunlight, and even math. Boktai is a unique game with great music, beautiful graphics, and a unique gameplay mechanic that pushed the Gameboy to its limits. Let's look at some of the things that I think made this game what it is. The sound design in this game is amazing. The music, voice acting, monster sounds, and even the death song that plays are some of the best sounds I've ever heard come from a Game Boy. Outside of the game just looking great, especially for the Game Boy Advanced, there are also some cool graphical effects, such as when you eat too many rotten fruits. The game turns all pixelated, which makes gameplay all but impossible until it runs out. There are also several different levels of difficulty that you can choose from. What's neat is that you can change the difficulties of the puzzles and combat independently, just in case you're better at one or the other. This is something that you don't see very often and a really nice touch, but more on the difficulty later. Another interesting addition to the game is the level of detail they put into the time zones that are included. Not only can you choose the time zone you're in, you can also choose from a large list of cities closest to you. The city that you choose increases or decreases the sensitivity of the light sensor. This is handy because as you get farther towards the poles, either north or south, the sun's intensity is lessened. This lets you get full bars of sun even in these areas that receive less sun. While on the topic of the sun, part of the way through the game you're affected with a curse that keeps you from using your gun del Sol and warping long distances. This curse can only be cured by standing under the Tree of Life at exactly sunrise and letting the morning dew drip on your head. For me, this was 6:55 a.m., and I'll have to say I've never been more excited to wake up at 7 a.m. in my life. Let's talk about continues. If you're anything like me, you make a lot of stupid mistakes when playing video games. This leads to unnecessary deaths that can often set you back hours. Boktai has you covered on this front, as you get an unlimited amount of continues, and when you die, you're only sent back to the beginning of the last room you entered, something I definitely appreciated in my playthrough. When you beat the game, you're given a password that can be entered in the Boktai 2 and Konami's website to earn a title that corresponds to how you played in the game. There are 15 unique titles to earn, each with their own comments by Otanko. Sadly, the service was taken down in 2014, but you can still find a list with the titles and their comments online. Hideo Kojima got his inspiration for Django, Sabata, and Ringo from some of his favorite 60s spaghetti westerns. These are movies made in Europe, usually by an Italian director, about the American Wild West. This is also where he got the idea of having Django drag the coffin of the immortals behind him. Critically, the game was well received, with the lowest score it got being an 8 out of 10. Well, that is other than Matt Helgeson from Game Informer. Pause if you want to read the whole thing, but essentially he gave the game a 5 out of 10 because he had to go outside. What? Did you think you were going to be able to sit inside and play a game with a solar sensor? I mean, the game's name is Boktai, the sun is in your hand. You're telling me not a single person at Game Informer wanted to go sit outside and Boktai got stuck with this guy? Alright, well Matt's got me slightly annoyed, let's look at some of the complaints that I had about the game. The first and main gripe that I have are the puzzles themselves. I played on the recommended mode for puzzles and combat, and to be honest, some of the puzzles are pretty difficult. I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm definitely not the dumbest, and I have to admit, I struggled with some of them a lot longer than I should. The developers must have had some sort of idea that the puzzles were bordering on too hard, because on one of them there's even a loser button that solves the puzzle for you. The plate then reads, "Here forever engraved is the name of the loser, Django." While I took much too long to solve some of these puzzles, I didn't have to look any of the solutions up until the very end. The last puzzle in the game has you look at a series of colored squares on the ground with a placard on the wall that says blue plus red equals purple. Then, upstairs is a number pad from 0 to 9. I wasn't even sure what it was asking for, but I was lucky enough to brute force my way through it by guessing. To my dismay, when I went upstairs, there was an even more convoluted shape of blocks and another 3 numbers to guess. This is what broke me. I wasn't even sure what the game was asking me for, and I definitely wasn't checking all 1,000 possible number combinations. I tried for an hour or two and then just finally gave up. To my surprise, when I looked it up, it seemed like no one else had a really great grasp on what it was asking for either. Something about red and blue counting as purple, and purple counting for red and blue, I don't know. It was incredibly too cryptic for a Game Boy game made for children. The only other issue I had with the game is that when you beat the final boss, your save state is wiped, whether you want it to be or not. This is mildly annoying after sinking 15 to 20 hours into a game. I was looking forward to taking another look around the world after beating it and challenging the never-ending battle tower in the southeast. I went here earlier in the game without beating all the immortals, and I was only able to progress so far. So keep this in mind if you're doing a playthrough. Don't beat the final boss until you fully explored the world to your heart's content. Boktai has been some of the most fun I've had with a video game in quite some time. The amount of care that Konami and their team put into this game is apparent. The solar function was way ahead of its time, and it definitely has that Kojima touch of creativity. It was an enjoyable experience from beginning to end with several different twists and turns in the story that I'm sure you guys will enjoy. Some may think that the solar sensor is a gimmick, Matt Helgerson, but I wholeheartedly disagree. As long as you're in a part of the world where the sun shines, you shouldn't have an issue playing this game to its fullest extent. You can even use things like the star lens, solar station, and bank to save excess sunlight for you when you know you're not going to be able to go outside for a while. If you really don't want to go outside that badly, you can always use the Lone System or download a sun hack ROM that allows you to control the sunlight amount. Regardless of how you play, I highly recommend you give this overlooked game a shot. What about you? Do you know of any Game Boy Advance games that you think are overlooked? Drop them down in the comments below and you just might see a review on them. Feel free to like and subscribe for more forgotten games, and as always, thanks for watching.